Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. In all my time as a reggae fan, I haven't seen anything close to the paradox that was the amazing Gregory Isaacs. A supremely endowed and talented human being, but one whose blessings were nullified and eventually overwhelmed by his personal demons that came in the form of crack cocaine. He started out as one of the most complete musicians that the reggae genre has ever seen, but the last 2 decades of his life was a back-to-back tale of chaos as he would spiral down the rabbit hole of addiction, which caused his body and career to slowly unravel. And out of many stories, this particular video tells the tale of Gregory Isaacs' chaotic, dangerous, and sometimes hilarious adventures on the UK leg of his 1989 European tour. An epic tour that saw the cool ruler, backed by elite backing band, the Rhythm Kings, put on incredible shows in different countries over several weeks, the high point being a magnificent concert in Amsterdam that saw Gregory at his flowing best. By then, Gregory was almost 10 years into the addiction, which had wreaked havoc on his mind, as well as his ability to keep performing at the highest level as a musician. But for the most part of that tour, he was kept in check and tip-top condition, all thanks to the experience and expertise of his tour manager Copeland Forbes. And the last shows on mainland Europe took place in Sweden, with the UK being the final leg of that tour. It would, however, be that final lap that would see Copeland Forbes lose control of Gregory. A final lap that saw the entire crew come within inches of death, jail time, and not to mention broken limbs and all sorts of trouble with angry fans and promoters. As said earlier, the experience in mainland Europe had been almost seamless. Copeland Forbes, arguably the greatest concert tour manager in history, had amassed priceless experience under his belt, managing logistics for the likes of Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and the Mighty Diamonds since the early 1970s. He has skillfully kept Gregory Isaacs as sober as possible throughout the tour, but in England, it was a whole new ballgame. For one thing, Gregory knew the UK like the back of his hand, as it had been like his second home since 1977. And secondly, Copeland Forbes let his guard down, thinking nothing could go wrong at that stage. Gregory and the crew arrived in London in the morning for a show in Brighton that evening. Copeland Forbes hired a bus to ferry the band to their hotel while he rode with Gregory in a rented Rolls Royce. And en route to the hotel, they found themselves in Brixton, a South London community that is famous for its rich Afro-Caribbean population. Gregory said he wanted to stop and say hi to a friend in the neighborhood, so the driver would park the car and Gregory alighted, saying he will be back in just a minute. But 2 hours later, Gregory still hadn't returned, causing Copeland Forbes to panic and combed the entire neighborhood to find him. After a few hours of a frantic search, he found Gregory passed out on a couch in a friend's flat close by. Forbes began to panic because it was about an hour to the scheduled show. However, he managed to revive Gregory and got him to the venue just in time for the gig. Gregory put on a great show, with the audience oblivious of what had almost happened. Not taking any more chances, Copeland Forbes decided to keep Gregory's undesirable friends and their drug habits far away as possible. He had previously booked rooms for all of them at the Columbia Hotel in West London, but chose to get a luxury apartment for Gregory alone at Mayfair in central London. And even better, Gregory's wife June Isaacs had been flown in to keep an eye on him. So he took Gregory to the flat after the show and dropped him off before returning to the hotel for a well-deserved night's rest. But early the next day, Copeland Forbes was woken up by a call from the guest house where Gregory was staying and was told to come over as soon as possible. Forbes rushed over there and at the front desk saw water that was running down the stairs from Gregory's flat. He flew upstairs and found the apartment literally upside down with the bathtub overflowing before dashing to turn off the tap. And right there was Gregory and a friend of his called Jobber, both looking stoned out of their minds from the look of them. While trying to assess the extent of the damage, Gregory's friend Jobber told Forbes that Gregory needed £10,000 immediately, no matter what. And when Forbes responded that he didn't have that kind of money, Gregory told him point blank that he wouldn't perform at that evening show in Huddersfield if he didn't get the money. When June Isaacs screamed at Forbes not to give them any more money, Gregory got furious at her, and his friend Jobber began to move aggressively towards Forbes when suddenly they all heard a knock at the door. And when they opened it, it was a lawyer who worked for Gregory's management company. Between her and Forbes, they gave Gregory £1,500, which he accepted reluctantly, and he agreed to go for the show starting in a few hours' time, but refused to get in a rented Rolls Royce and instead chose to ride with Jobber, who came in his own car. So after Gregory and his pal Jobber left for the venue, Forbes stayed behind to tidy up the apartment before heading out to Huddersfield, which was about 3 hours away. And when Forbes finally arrived at the venue around 2 a.m., The first thing he saw was the show promoter outside looking furious, as well as a squad of police in full anti-riot gear, not to mention an angry crowd outside. Apparently, Gregory hadn't shown up and was 2 hours late for the show. And to make matters worse, the crowd was angry and beginning to get violent. And when Forbes told him that he didn't know where Gregory was, the promoter seized the keys to the rented Rolls Royce, and the crowd began to slowly close in on Copeland Forbes, some armed with bottles, knives, and metal pipes. The police were badly outnumbered, but were trying their best to pacify the crowd. Meanwhile, the wedding band members, who had been hiding backstage, began to sneak out of the venue one by one when a man with a shotgun came in muttering threats. They abandoned their equipment and instruments and quietly made their way to the bus that was parked down the street and onward to their hotel in Bradford. Miraculously, amidst all the chaos, Copeland Forbes managed to escape on foot. He would find his way to the hotel, and he and the band members all stood in the lobby talking about how lucky they were to have escaped, when suddenly in the distance they saw a convoy of about 20 cars speeding up the hill to the hotel. Thinking the show promoter and mob had found them, the band members all scattered and scampered to their rooms, while Forbes ran to the hotel restaurant and hid under a table. But to their relief, it turned out to be Gregory Isaacs, his friend Jobber, and about 20 other guys in tow. Forbes angrily confronted him for not showing up for the gig, and Gregory apologized, saying his friend Jobber made a mistake and thought the show was in Leeds, a city 20 miles off track. Gregory and Forbes managed to pacify the angry promoter in Huddersfield, and the show was rescheduled to the next week. And this time, Forbes wouldn't take any more chances. The cool ruler showed up for that gig and put in another spectacular show that wiped away all the bad memories from the previous week. The next show was built to be at Birmingham and was to hold at the popular Hummingbird nightclub. And on the evening of that show, Gregory once again refused to get in the rented Rolls Royce and chose once again to ride with Jabba to the venue. While Forbes was distracted, the pair had gotten stoned and badly drunk. But this time, Forbes insisted that he would drive right behind them to ensure they didn't go missing once again. And according to Forbes, Gregory's friend Jobber was an extremely bad driver, and in no time, a police car pulled them over. But before Gregory and Jobber could interact with the cop, who would have easily seen that they were high, Forbes ran over to the police guy to do all the talking, and he would introduce himself and apologized for Jobber's bad driving and explained that they were late for a show and that Gregory Isaacs was in the car that he stopped. Luckily for them, the cop was a big fan of Gregory Isaacs, and incidentally, his wife was already at the venue waiting for the show to start. The policeman told them to get back in the car and drive right behind him, and he would give them a classy police escort to the venue. As always, Gregory got on stage and put on a magnificent show. After the show, Gregory and Jobber would once again disappear to Forbes' annoyance and frustration, especially as they had a show that was built to hold later on that day. Forbes looked everywhere for Gregory and Jobber but couldn't find them, and eventually Gregory failed to turn up for that gig, and like Huddersfield was cancelled with the band almost getting beaten up once again. Gregory would show up in London 2 days later, stoned out of his mind, and apologized profusely to the band. Apparently, he had gotten badly stoned and had turned up the next day at the Hummingbird nightclub to perform. It seemed that in his state, he'd forgotten that he'd already played there the night before. It had been one exhausting tour for everybody except Gregory, but thank goodness it was all over. And on the morning of their flight back to Jamaica, the crew was packed and set to leave. But about 2 hours to their departure time, Gregory, who had hung out the night before and of course had gotten stoned, was still fast asleep, practically unconscious. And Copeland Forbes just barely managed to wake him up and get him to the airport just in time. And the second their plane would land in Kingston and they got their luggage, not wanting any more drama, all the band members would grab their luggage and practically run for their lives out of that airport. And that was the end of Gregory's wacky tour of the UK in 1989. And this was just one of so many crazy stories of how addiction would affect his reputation and career, and he would develop a terrible name for himself with promoters for being very unreliable. But somehow, his loyal fan base stayed with him up until the very end, even when he could barely hold a note and move the crowds like he used to. And truly, he became reggae's biggest paradox and the ultimate cautionary tale about the dangers of addiction. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.